All right, let's dive right into a really big question. How do we actually know if a country is successful? I mean, is it all about the money, or is there something way deeper going on? Let's get into it. So, let me ask you this right off the bat. When you hear a country has a booming economy, do you just automatically think, wow, everyone there must be doing great? For the longest time, that's exactly what we did. But as we're going to see, that whole idea, it's really starting to crumble. Which brings us perfectly to our first point. We're going to talk about the big one, GDP, and really pull back the curtain on why it often gives us an incomplete and sometimes a totally warped view of what's actually happening. Yeah, you've definitely heard of GDP, right? It's everywhere. News headlines, economic reports, the whole shebang. It's basically just a giant calculator adding up everything bought and sold inside a country's borders in a year. Doesn't matter if it's a local coffee shop or a giant multinational factory, if it's happening there, it counts. Okay, but there's another player in the game, GNI, or gross national income. And the difference here is super important. GDP, that's all about location. GNI, that's about ownership. So it counts the money made by a country's people and its companies, even if they're making it on the other side of the planet. And you can see why this is often a much better yardstick for some developing countries, right? It captures all that crucial money being sent home from people working abroad. So you might think, okay, cool. Let's just take the GNI divided by how many people live there, and poof, average income. Sounds simple enough. Well, not so fast, because this is where the real illusion starts. That one little average number, it can hide some pretty shocking truths. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. Just look at Brazil. On paper, it has a pretty decent GNI, but when you actually break it down, wow. The top 1% of people, they control nearly half of all the wealth in the entire country. Meanwhile, the bottom 50% of the population, they have to share less than 10%. I mean, think about that. So the big takeaway here is, what good is an average if practically nobody is actually average? And you know what? That's not even the only problem with these big official numbers. There's this whole other piece of the puzzle, a massive chunk of the economy that is just, well, completely invisible to the people counting. I'm talking about what's called the informal economy. This is all the economic activity that happens, under the radar. It's not officially tracked, not taxed. Think about the person selling amazing street food, or getting paid cash for a babysitting gig, or any kind of under-the-table work. For billions of people around the world, this is their economy. And the sheer size of it is just staggering. In a lot of developing nations, this informal economy can account for almost half of everything happening. Now, in more developed countries, that number is a lot smaller. But just think about what that means. For a huge part of the globe, our official numbers like GDP and GNI, they could be missing half the story. That's huge. All right, so it's pretty clear that just counting the money doesn't cut it. So, what's next? What else should we be looking at? Well, this is where we get to the really important stuff, the human factor. It's about looking past the bank accounts and trying to measure what truly makes a good life. And as soon as you start looking at these human-focused numbers, these really powerful patterns just jump right out at you. You can see it right here. In less developed countries, you tend to see higher birth rates, higher infant mortality, and lower literacy. And in more developed countries, it's the exact opposite. And these aren't just random stats. They tell you a story about a country's healthcare, its schools, the real-life systems that people depend on every day. And we can dig even deeper than that. We can look at things like, how easy is it to see a doctor? That's going to affect how long people live or how safe childbirth is. What about schools? Are there good educational opportunities for everyone? Each of these little details adds another layer to the picture, helping us see things from a much more, human perspective. Okay, so we've got all this economic data over here and all this social data over here. But how in the world do you put it all together to get one clear picture? Well, that's exactly what we're going to look at now. How do the experts combine all these different pieces? The answer is pretty clever, actually. They create what are called composite indices. So instead of just banking on one single number, they take a whole bunch of different measurements and kind of blend them together. The goal is to get one single score that tells a much, much richer story. And a fantastic example of this in action is the Gender Inequality Index, the GII. What it does is it zeroes in on the gaps between men and women in three really important areas. First, reproductive health. Second, how empowered women are. Think political power and education. And third, their role in the job market. Now, listen up, because this part is a little counterintuitive, but super important. With the GII, a higher score is actually worse. It means there's more inequality. So, what you're looking for is a low score. A low GII means a country is doing a better job at creating a level playing field for everyone. And that's a huge sign of real development. And then there's maybe the most famous one of all, the UN's Human Development Index, or HDI. I like to think of it like a recipe with three main ingredients. You've got a long and healthy life, which they measure with life expectancy. You've got access to knowledge, measured by how many years people go to school. And then you've got a decent standard of living, which brings back that GNI per capita number. It's kind of the ultimate mix of all the things we've been talking about. So, okay, we've talked about GDP. We've talked about that invisible economy. We've looked at social stats and these big, fancy indices. But at the end of the day, so what? Why should any of us care about any of this? Well, it matters a whole lot, actually. This isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. This is the information that helps organizations figure out where help is needed most. It's what guides where aid money goes, how governments make new laws. It gives us a real way, to see if a country is truly making progress for its people, not just making more money. It lets us finally answer that question we started with. Is a country's wealth actually making life better for its citizens? And that kind of leaves us with one last big idea to chew on. We've gotten a lot better at taking a snapshot of a country right now, in the present. But what about the future? What's coming next? If you had to create just one new metric to measure a country's future, its ability to innovate, to handle a crisis, to be sustainable, what would that one magic number be? What would you measure? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.